Well, Republicans are banking on a red wave to carry them back into power this election day. According to most polls, Democrats have lost some momentum during the final stretch of the midterm cycle and could lose control of the House and Senate. So joining us now to talk a little bit more about this is Jeff Rowe. He is the founder of Axiom Strategies, one of the largest Republican political consulting firms in the U.S. All right, I'm glad you are here. Let us talk about this. Which races do you believe Republicans can pick up seats in the House and the Senate?
I think the Senate races that are most critical are the ones that we've been talking about for several months now. And I've not seen a party since, probably in our party at least, since 2010 have 10 straight days of momentum. Typically, it goes back and forth. Now, the Democrats between Memorial Day and Labor Day had 90 days of momentum, which was the best any party in power has ever done in the midterm. But the last 10 days, you've seen these races break, and we've seen it from Arizona, which is now a dead heat. We're going to see the election day votes will come in. Blake Masters will win election day. He'll likely lose narrowly the early vote, and I think we'll be counting that race for a couple weeks. I would suggest both teams get their lawyers on hand. I've done a lot of races in Arizona. I had Martha McSally when she lost narrowly last time, and the recount takes a while. It's very expensive, so they should start that. In Nevada, we feel very good about Adam Laxalt. That's a race that we're doing. We essentially tied the early vote. We're going to win election vote today. Turnout's good. There's the weather that was forecast didn't happen, so we feel very good about that. We go across the country, and North Carolina's in good shape. Herschel Walker, I think it's probably 60-40 whether he needs a runoff to win or not, but he's going to get more votes today. And then you go up to New Hampshire, and that's a bit of a wild card. Ron Johnson's great in Wisconsin, but New Hampshire, it's all election day vote. There's no early vote. It's very difficult to poll New Hampshire. We have a House race there that we feel good about, but I think the Bulldog and Hassan race is probably too close to call.
So, Jeff, you just mentioned the momentum that Republicans have enjoyed in the last couple of days. Our polling suggests that the electorate, most people, both Republicans and Democrats, are concerned about the economy, crime, and the overturning of Roe v. Wade. But when you look specifically at Republicans, you find most people who are voting for Republicans candidates have inflation, the economy, and crime at the top of mind. And for Democrats, the galvanizing issue remains abortion. So what has been the message from Republicans that have allowed them to sort of continue to fundraise and to continue to build on the momentum that you described?
I think it's a culmination, particularly in these Senate races. I'll just speak to that for a second, but also in the House, where there's over $1.2 billion spent between the two parties on effectively 50 seats. That's a lot of money in a little small area. And in these Senate races are now all the races that I just talked about. When you count the outside groups, it's between $150 and $200 million each. When you go into those states, and I'm sorry if your viewers are in those states, I'm sorry for the advertising that you had to tolerate for the last 90 days. But if you do watch it and you watch a Republican, it is all about kitchen table issues. It's gas prices. It's definitely attacking the Democrats and Biden and linking Biden to the Democrat senator. And if you're a Democrat strategist running an ad in those campaigns, you're talking about President Donald Trump and you're talking about abortion. And I think I'm quite confident, and I'm a pessimist in politics at least, that we're going to win the Senate tonight and we're going to get probably 28 to 35 seats in the House. I think that's a foregone conclusion nearly. I think we've got to scratch it out in the courts and figure out how we're going to, how the recalls or the recounts are going to go and things like that. But when it all shakes out, I believe that's where we'll be roughly 51, 52 seats in the Senate and plus 30 in the House. I think what was really going to be a measurement of this election cycle, though, is what is the long-term damage to the party, the Democrat Party, to focus on abortion, where, by the way, Hispanic swing voters are more pro-life than white voters, where African Americans are more pro-life than they are Republican. So when they're talking about those issues, they are driving a wedge right into their own base, and they're obsessed with that base, and they're obsessed with that issue. And I believe they do it because they think they're going to trade off for suburban college-educated women, which they've been doing very well with over essentially the Trump years. And so that might be a good short-term strategy. I don't think it is, because I still think we're going to win tonight because the economy was out of control, inflation's out of control, and people are very upset with Biden and his performance. So the short-term strategy didn't work out, but I can tell you the long-term strategy is doing tremendous damage. If you're watching these ads, and they're cutting news programs to run political ads in some of these states. And when you run 6 minutes of commercials for the Republican candidates and for the Democrat candidates, it's amazing how Republicans are talking about issues that they care about every single day and have to deal with every single day. And Democrats are talking about essentially Trump, January 6th, and abortion.
Let me ask you this about the effectiveness of surrogates. We've seen surrogates traveling around. Former President Trump is one of them. But he's hinted at a 2024 run for the White House. Is there a chance that you might consider working with him, because we know you've run a campaign before, that you might consider working with him if that campaign becomes a reality?
Well, one of my professional goals in life is to walk a president into the Oval Office and pull the chair out for him and be the campaign manager or a senior strategist on a campaign like that. So if he does in fact run, and if he in fact is the nominee, then I'd be honored to be part of any political campaign for a Republican nominee. I think that there's a big decision that Republicans and Democrats have to make, and I think it's going to be upon us very quickly. And that is, do we want to rerun the 2020 race? And is that what we want as a party, or do we want to look forward into other, people that are sitting on the bench and want them to run? I'm not in the smoke-filled rooms to figure out how all that sorted out. But President Trump is obviously the leader of the party. He's the most popular Republican in the history of the nation, and he's the most popular with Republicans. He was 7-0 in Senate endorsements. His endorsement matters a lot. Surrogates overall just give campaigns the opportunity to communicate to voters around the event. And so when Trump comes to town, he got more votes than anybody else got. Not nearly as many people are going to vote this time. So what you're really trying to do with Obama and Biden, I don't think he's probably going very many places, but with Trump, is you try and communicate to the voters that voted for him last time but aren't participating this time. And you use him as a tool to communicate to those voters. And so that's the impact of that. I think that 2024, if he announces next week, I think it'll be very interesting to see how many people immediately jump on board versus how many people want to let it play out. And I think that'll be a real test. If everybody jumps on board, then I think it'll be over really quickly. We'll start talking about who his VP nominee may be. And I think it'll back Biden into running again.
But Jeff, I don't know if you caught Mick Mulvaney on our air this morning. You mentioned the former president. He lost the 2020 election to the guy who won, who is the president of the United States, Joe Biden. So that was a loss. And Mick Mulvaney said today on CBS News that Trump is the one Republican, I'm quoting him now, one Republican who can lose. What do you make of that?
Mick's probably a little sour, by the way. His tenure ended with the Trump administration. I'm not sure that I'd go that far. They're tied today, and I've polled I've polled head to head a lot. Trump and Biden are tied today. Now, to be fair, Trump's been out of the limelight for 2 years and hasn't somewhat out of the limelight, and whatever limelight there has not been good. And then Biden has had a pretty rough run, you would have to say, and so you have two pretty embattled. 79-year-old, almost 80-year-old men slugging it out. But no, I think
not
it'd
a
be
pretty picture. The way when you put it that way, Jeff.
2 more years of that, right? That's what we're all saying. But no, I think so. If Trump runs, Biden and Biden decides to run again, it's just going to be a really close race. And those two can really diagnostically separate people very quickly. There's no question about who's a Trump supporter. You see they're waving flags. You see them with bumper stickers on the car and the hats that they wear and the shirts that they wear. By the way, I don't ever see that for Biden. I've never seen a Biden hat. I don't know if they exist. I don't see a button shirt or a Biden shirt or a flag. I've seen a few bumper stickers here or there, but the energy that Trump brings versus I think the reluctance that the Democrats have around Biden is like, hey, yeah, he's our guy, but gosh. And then if Trump does announce to run, I don't know how the Democrats shelve their incumbent Democrat president who beat him last time and try and talk him out of beating him again. And so I think we could be looking at a rerun.
Wow. Really fascinating. Jeff Rowe, great to have you. Thank you very much.
You bet. Thanks for having me, guys.